Hello. As I said to Oz, I'm just a random guy they picked up off the street to fill the closing keynote slot that just by some chance happened to be doing some stuff in the Agile space, which is really convenient, otherwise it'd be completely irrelevant. So I have been working in software engineering for about 20 years, and during this time I've done a whole bunch of different things. I've been a tech lead, a project manager, architect, software engineer, tester, team lead, development manager, BA, and also a product owner on occasion. So before we dive deep into this topic, what I'd like is if anyone in the room who's a product owner, or maybe possibly an aspiring product owner, if you could stand up and make yourselves known, and we have some presents for you. So me and so I'm going to give you some stickers. So, I said I would handle the front row, but there's basically no one on the front row. You're all hiding further back, so I'll handle some over here. So if I could just give you that sticker, there you go. And you can have those. In fact, if you could just distribute those along, you can have those ones. I think they're great. Maybe you guys can have some of those. I'm giving more out than I need to, but if you could pass them along the row. Oh yeah, you can have some of those. If you could pass them along. And there we go. There's one for you as well. Hello? Someone missed them? Oh no. All right. Well, you can have that one. You can have that one. There we go. In that. So some of these stickers. There are a few labels that some people might have heard in relation to product ownership. So who's heard the phrase single ringable neck before? Yeah. So out of interest, who could the product owners, I can sort of see where you're, could you raise your hands just for a second? Now leave your hand in the air if you like the phrase single ringable neck being associated with yourselves. One person here, okay. So why is single ringable neck fun for you? Accountability. Okay, that's interesting. So you'd like that kind of violence in the workplace. As a general, because I mean, we've also got, there's a few other phrases that I've heard there, the one throat to choke, I quite like that one, and other things. Does anyone know where single ringable neck originates from? Has anyone heard where that came from? Anyone? Any ideas? No? Okay, so it's actually in the book that Jeff Sutherland wrote about Scrum, how to do twice as much stuff in half the time, or something thereabouts. It's part of the definition. In fact, it's mentioned, I think the phrase might even be mentioned in the Scrum Guide, or at least a previous Scrum Guide. They possibly edited it out. I find that really interesting, that actually this is not just a kind of fun phrase that has been batted about. I'm feeling like I'm echoing. I'm going to just make that look away from me. Is that it actually kind of was core at the thinking when Scrum and some of the other areas where we've had similar roles were actually thought up, this idea of a single point of accountability. So we will dive into that a little bit more, but just out of interest, who thinks that a single point of accountability, the person whose fault it is essential to delivering a project? Anyone? I know you do. Why do you think that? Because you mentioned accountability. So what do you just explain, if you can, if you don't mind, what you think there? Oh yeah, that's a good idea. I was going to repeat it back, but that's fine.
You normally are the point of call for any information, or if the requirements are not met, or the end product or feature is not delivered. Yeah. So it's
okay being
I didn't
A
say
little
it's
bit of-
okay, but it's usually the,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay,
The
it's
reality.
not okay, but it's usually done. All right, that's an interesting observation. All right, so let's move to the next bit. Now we're going to experiment with some technology. So I'm going to ask you the question, what makes a great product owner? So what I'd like you to think about are words, just single words that represent an attribute of a great product owner. So we're going to try this. We'll see what happens. If the Wi-Fi works, it hopefully won't stay a white screen for too long. Oh, there we go. Look at that. So if you go to polev.com/wisenoodles on your phones, you should be able to zap up words up onto my screen, and we'll be able to look at them. So one word each. Now think about word, just a word that represents an aspect or a trait of a fantastic product owner. And hopefully, the Wi-Fi will work. At this point, this is when you get everyone to log in to a website. The Wi-Fi that's been totally fine all day then isn't fine. But we'll see what happens. Does it seem to be working? Or is it all falling over and really slow? Oh, available. Okay, let's who could you raise your hand? Who said available? Right at the back. Could someone maybe pass a mic back just to the chap at the back there? Available. Mr. Available? Where's Mr. Available? Oh, over there. There you go, Oz. So could you explain why is available important? Oh, that's fine. Just, if you shout it out, I'll repeat it. Don't worry.
To help make decisions, obviously, more effective and faster,
Okay.
faster decision making.
So what, out of interest, can anyone tell me what happens when a product owner is not available? And who actually, just as a general show of hands, who's currently working with a team or on a team where the product owner is less available than you would like them to be? Okay, so can one of those people tell me what the symptom, what's the symptom of that? How do you know, how can you tell that they're not available when you want them to be? What happens on the team?
We don't have the right information at the right time to
Okay.
be able to do our jobs.
Okay. So what do you do when that happens?
We try and make a scene,
Yeah.
escalate.
So you make a guess as to what might be it. I've also seen teams that sense that's right. I've seen three options. Sometimes they make a guess, which is a fun thing to do, and that can work actually in some respects. If the team is empowered to make those decisions based on what they know, it's probably the best possible outcome. But actually what I've seen most likely happens is the teams go, oh crap, we can't make any progress on this thing, so we're blocked on that thing until Bob the PO comes back from his holidays, so we'll just start on this thing. Okay, so that's blocked. Then we start on this thing, and then, oh crap, we can't make any more progress now on this thing until Bob comes back from his holidays. So we'll start on this thing, and you end up with WIP slowly piling up, and that isn't normally a great thing. Although, you know, occasionally Bob comes back and is like, wow, you've been doing so much stuff, despite there being lots of blocked stuff on the board. So let's look at a few more of these. I quite like... yeah, I'm going to ignore some of them. Interesting. I want to know who's Thomas. That was a popular one. Because there's more than one of them likes Thomas, because it's quite big. It's not like sexy. There's only one of the sexies, you know. Apparently Thomas is an important trait. There's a Thomas. What's awesome about Thomas, or product owners named Thomas?
Yeah, we found Thomas.
Oh, is that just him?
I've got nothing to say at this point.
Okay, so there's a bunch of stuff on here. We discussed a little bit about availability. Let's look at one more with more seriousness. I'd like to talk about vision. Why is vision important? Who can talk about who sent vision up? I know there's more than one of you because it's like massive, so you can't hide. Anyone want to explain why vision is important? Sorry, Oz, you're going to get loads of exercise in this session. Oh, and there's vision down here too. There you go. So why is vision important?
Well, the person needs a fair understanding of where the product is going and what route and avenues.
So they need to be able to have the vision to guide the team. Is that so? So they're kind of up front. Okay. What did this person want to say if that was different?
I think vision gives clarity and boundaries.
Okay. Clarity and boundaries. That's interesting. Okay. Interesting. How do they know what the vision is? How does a PO know what the product vision is? Any ideas? Any ideas? They create the vision. Okay, interesting. All right. Well, we'll come back to that one. So there was a bunch of things there, a whole bunch of traits. Who's worked with a product owner, or potentially is a product owner, that genuinely you felt really embodied all of the traits that you think are important? Who's had the opportunity to work with that? Or maybe that's you, possibly. But who's seen that before? So no one, one person in this room, two people, maybe 2.5, 3.5, 4, that have worked with a product owner that they genuinely thought, okay, that's much worse than normal. I feel sorry for all of you. Okay. All right. So let's look at a little bit at what a product owner is. So this is the definition from the Agile Alliance site. It's largely, I think, from what I could tell, taken from the Scrum Guide. So I'm going to go through it and just have a conversation about it. So the product owner is a role on a product development team responsible for managing the product backlog in order to achieve the desired outcome that a product development team seeks to accomplish. Now, I kind of like this as a starting point, okay? It's kind of nice. We have the product owner is a role on the product development team. They don't own the product development team. I've seen that confusion occasionally. And they manage the product backlog, okay, in order to achieve the desired outcome that the product development team seeks to accomplish. That's kind of nice. So actually, the whole product development team are helping come up with that vision, that goal, that direction, collaboratively, including the product owner. That seems pretty good to me. Then this definition has kind of a bunch of subpoints, and it kind of goes downhill from there, unfortunately. So it clearly identify and describe product backlog items in order to build a shared understanding of the problem and the solution with the product development team. I have a lot of issues with this. To me, and maybe other people have different understandings of this sentence, it seems that the PO is now responsible for identifying all of the problems, defining them, possibly even solving them, and then communicating the problem and the solution with the development team, at which point the development team, I guess, go to the pub? I'm not sure. It seems possibly not necessarily immediately useful. And also, I think there's another issue I have here, perhaps a more serious one, is this word solution. Raise your hand as a PO if you have brought, or in fact, if you're on a team and you've had solutions brought to you to implement. Okay, that's interesting, and that seems a slightly contradictory thing. If you've been brought a solution, that's a kind of crappy solution, as I'm guessing the solution when it was written on an index card or stuck in Jira wasn't actually solving anything at that point. Is that right? I'm going to assume that the ticket that says customer should be able to submit form with blah, 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 whatever it is, that in itself didn't solve anything for anyone. You don't have a solution until the problem's solved. And you can't bring someone a solution to implement because it's not a solution. It's an idea, a possibility, a hypothesis, a theory, a something, but it's definitely not a solution. So let's look at another bit. Make decisions regarding the priority of the product backlog items even, in order to deliver the maximum outcome with the minimum output. When I first read that, I thought maximum outcome and minimum output sounded kind of funny. It's actually from Jeff Patton, but I still think it sounds like something the Terminator might say. And I'm not going to try and do that accent. So what's interesting is the question is, how do we actually make the decision like this? How does a product owner know what's more important than something else? Any ideas? Anyone want to enlighten me to this? It seems I'm really confused by this. I'm not sure how they know. How do you know which is more valuable than something else? No hands? Go ahead. Just say it. It's fine.
I think he finds out from the stakeholders.
So they find out from the stakeholders. Okay. Hold that thought. We will come back to it. But that's a good step. One step up the hierarchy, in essence. Let's come back to that one. Determine whether a product backlog item was satisfactorily delivered. Okay, this is interesting. How do you know something is satisfactorily delivered? Anyone want to tell me, what does done mean in your organization? Anyone want to tell me? Go live? So after it's gone live, okay. The interesting thing here is these two words, satisfactorily delivered. So something could be in production, could be there, it could be in front of the customer, but we don't know actually if it solved any of their problems unless we do some important things like ask them. And that's quite important, I think. We'll come back to that one as well. So the very last one here, ensure transparency into the upcoming work of the product development team. I find this a little confusing because it seems to contradict what we said earlier. If the product development team, including the product owner and all of them together, have defined the vision and the direction, then surely the product owner doesn't need to make sure the product backlog is transparent. The product backlog is just available. It's just a thing that everyone is working on and working and collaborating on together. It seems very odd that they would need to be the gatekeeper. Who thinks that, or has been the gatekeeper? Has anyone ever, I've seen some teams where the product owner won't let their team see more than a couple of weeks ahead. Has anyone seen that before? Yeah, you know, in case the team, you'll ask them, I've asked them why. I said, oh, so why can't they see all of the backlog? And they said, well, you know, they might just start developing stuff. They might just go mad. It's like, you know, they might start working from the bottom of the backlog. And you're kind of like, okay, that's an interesting thought. I've not seen that happen yet, but so this is interesting as well. There's this question of where the work comes from, and it goes back to the question of how we know what's important, you know, as well. Where does the work come from? We're all working on teams. Our teams are doing work and doing stuff, but where does it come from? Does anyone? Where does it come from? Did someone just say the business? That's an interesting one. So the business is an interesting one. The business is the whole thing. I mean, the business is what you work for, is the organization. There isn't really something else called the business. I know we like to refer to that quite a bit, but technically we're all employed by the business. You know, that is everyone. So that just is the cloud that floats around us. Where else? If it's not the business, I know that phrase is used, and I kind of understand to some degree what people infer that to mean. But I don't know whether that's useful. What's the next step? Where does the work come from? Pardon? Clients? Clients, okay, that's interesting. Clients is quite good. Okay, so let's assume clients, customers, hopefully external to your organization, the people that are actually paying your company money to survive. So there's a thing called user experience. Are people here familiar with UX? Has heard that phrase? Okay, great. That's good. We're not talking about that today, but I want to ask a question. In this room, who in your organization, which companies here use user experience as the guiding light, the main way they decide on their product strategy and direction? So you literally, for everything you do, you ask the customer. I saw one hand there. It was on one. Is it really just one? Oh, two? I'm feeling slightly better. How many people? We've got about 300 people in this room. About 300 people. Okay. That's it's a little sad. So the two people that put their hand up, you can't say anything now, which is kind of easy. Oh, 3, okay, so that's 1%. So the 99% of the room that didn't put their hand up then, how are you, where does your work come from? And how are you deciding what the right thing to do is? Anyone? Yeah.
It's the boss, the manager.
The boss, okay,
Yes.
great. So that's a very good answer. So there's another question. How does the boss know what the right thing to do is?
It depends on his budget.
Depends on... Oh, that's interesting. So budget-driven development. Okay. That's quite that's actually a really accurate description of... So go ahead.
Of some requirements lists from some stakeholder meeting somewhere.
A requirements list from the stake. So how do the stakeholders know what the right thing to do is? We don't know. It's sort of just yeah, I've found a really, really poor correlation between successful product strategy and wind direction, generally. So just as a note, don't take that as a valuable thing to take away from this session. So based on that conversation, how good do we think we are at knowing what to do? Maybe by a show of hands, put your hands in the air. Leave your hands, everyone put your hands in the air. Everyone like that, okay? So leave your hands in the air if you think that we get it right 50% of the time. Okay? Leave your hands in the air. So we're still at 50%. We think we get it right 30% of the time. Oh, okay. So we're only at okay. Maybe get it right 15% of the time. Okay, all right, let's see. So yeah, we're really, really quite useless at this. This was a study done by the Standish Group. They've done a bunch of studies in similar spaces. This particular one is called Exceeding Value. Their methods are really sketchy, I'll be honest. Well, they're not sketchy, they're just, people poke holes in them because it's actually really hard to kind of empirically verify whether or not a delivered feature is used in a particular environment, exactly what that means. But even if you assume kind of massive error margins on this, this shows us, you know, in their test, in their study, 80% of features are hardly ever infrequently used. So those are, you know, you were kind of, but to be honest, you're kind of still right if you thought it was less than 15, and you're probably still right if you thought it was more than 30. You can give a pretty wide error margin there. It's kind of sad, really. It seems like in product ownership, as a thing, as a practice we do in our organizations, we're not really great at it, which is a shame. And I don't think that's because of individual product owners in the room or anything else. I think that there's other things that are kind of blocking us. So what can we do to improve this? So the most important thing, the thing that we always forget, the Agile Superpower, is a thing I want to come back to at the end, but I'd like to go back in time. So can anyone tell me who this is, by any chance? Anyone? Whisper it, shout it. He's Taylor. Does someone say Taylor? Yes, Taylor, that's right. Frederick Winslow Taylor. He's an early 20th century humanitarian. This is something he said about his workers. The ordinary pig iron handler is not the type of man well suited to shoveling. He's too stupid. There's too much mental strain. All right, look, he wasn't a humanitarian. But he was a scientist, okay? What he did was that, I mean, people that have heard of Taylor, we tend to demonize him because largely some of this attitude here towards his workers is pretty much, sadly, the only element of what he demonstrated and what he explored when he was working that we seem to perpetuate in our organizations today, which is kind of sad, because actually what he was one of the first people, certainly that I could find, that used empiricism and data to drive decision making. How about that? You know, using actual data to make a decision on what you do in your business. It's crazy. So let's look at what he did. So what he used to do is that he's working in a metalworking factory. And if you imagine you've got a factory and there's a bunch of stations, okay, so you've got someone someone shoveling pig iron, someone working the metal, someone putting the metal into the furnace, etc., okay? And what he did is he went through and he looked at all of these processes and broke them down into their separate steps, okay? And then he timed them. He stood there with a stopwatch, probably a pocket watch, and was like, okay, so Bob's shoveling pig iron and he's taking this much time, and Jenny's on the metalworking, and Frank is on the boiler or whatever. I don't know anything about metalworking, so I'm making that stuff up. So what's interesting is that he measured each step. So he had this idea of how long all of this stuff took. And obviously, in a typical factory, you don't just have one person shoveling pig iron. You have 10 people, whatever, doing each of these roles. So what he did was he measured all of those people. And to his horror, he found that they were doing it differently. They weren't just doing it the same. There was Bob, and there was Frank, and there was Mike, and there was Paul, and there was Simon. And one of them was shoveling pig iron with the shovel his mum gave him for Christmas, and the other guy just like using his arms like this, and then someone else was like, actually, I prefer using this smaller shovel that over the years I've crafted and honed to the exact shape of the boiler, and I think it's the perfect way. And he was like, I mean, for goodness sakes, what's going on? And they were like, look, this is the way I like to work. This is how I like to do it. I'm a craftsman. I know my work. This is the way that I work. And yeah, he just sort of said, yeah, that's ludicrous. You obviously are not intelligent enough to have that kind of thought. And he then started to work through a process of finding the right way of doing this, because there must be the best way. So he started with, some down here, the one that was the quickest, which just happened to be, Mike's mum's shovel, okay, in the pig iron section. And he said, all right, guys, you're all going to use Mike's mum's shovel, okay, to do it. We're going to make some copies of them. Because what he started with there is a hypothesis that based on the data that I have in front of me, this information that says that, this particular shovel, based on what I've recorded in front of me, seems to be quickest, at least in Mike's hands, okay? That's a pretty good starting point for a hypothesis that says, maybe if all of the other people were doing this in the same way, there's a theory they might be doing it, they might do it a bit quicker. They might be able to improve. So he said, you're all going to use Mike's mum's shovel. I'm taking some, creative liberty with this story, if you hadn't realized. I have no idea whether Mike's mum gave him a shovel or not. And what he did initially they probably said, no, I don't want to use Mike's mum's shovel, and he just fired them, which is, an appropriate response to, that kind of rudeness and insubordination. And he tried an experiment once he had a group of people that were submissive enough to do it. He then gave them all the shovel, and he recorded them again. And he found, okay, that's interesting. So yeah, they are a little bit quicker. That seems great. But actually, they were all a little bit slower than he thought they were going to be the second time around. That's his learning. So he got some validation, but actually not completely validated. But that learning led to further hypotheses. And that hypothesis then led him to gradually improve the efficiency across the factory. And obviously, he was repeating this at all of the stations in the factories he was working with. And regardless of his views on humanity, the reason why he is celebrated is because of the fact that he did have massive, massive positive impacts to the factories that he was working with. And what he was able to do is actually create an environment of continuous learning. Now, in this context, sadly, the continuous learning was restricted to the upper echelons of his organization. The management tier, the only people, in his words, that he regarded to have the mental capacity to deal with that kind of complicated planning work. Not great. But he did have something there. So what was he missing? He seemed to be on the right track. So at around the same time this lady was working on this well-known tune, on the other side of the Pacific, there was this guy. Does anyone know who this guy is? Taiichi Ohno, fantastic. Okay. So Taiichi Ohno had a very different view. So Taiichi Ohno, between 1948 and 1975, him and Eiji Toyoda were creating a thing called the Toyota production system. This is going to kill me in a minute. I might just stand down here. Watch me fly off the thing. So he created the Toyota production system. And this was a way of working at the Toyota factories. And we'll go into a little bit into that in a minute. But this is what he said about people and workers in Toyota. People don't go to Toyota to work. They go there to think. This was decades ago, I point out. What's interesting is that well, clearly, he thought that his workers had the mental capacity for thinking, which is an interesting point. So the Toyota production system actually later became lean manufacturing in the US, and that later led into the developments that Mary Poppendick and her husband created into lean software. Although some people will testify strongly against it, strongly influenced, potentially became what we call Agile. So in 2001, notably, the same year another important document was published, Toyota packaged up all of their thinking around leadership and management and how they run their organization and released this thing they call the Toyota Way. This is 14 principles divided up into 2 key areas or 2 pillars. And I want to point out, we are not going to cover, this talk is not about all of the lean principles and all of the Toyota Way principles. We're going to look at a few of them. But I really, really implore people to do that research, to do that reading. It's very much available, and I think it has massive, massive value, and it gives a really good foundation for a lot of people working in this space. So before we go on, I want to play a little video. So this is a video about a factory, a Toyota factory in England. And it just is a nice demonstration about some of their attitudes and kind of summarizes why the Toyota Way and the Toyota production system is important. So hopefully the audio will work flawlessly. Look at that.
It's quite overwhelming when you walk through the stuff.
You've got things flying everywhere, boxes and trucks.
When you walk through the door and you actually see how big the place is.
After you've been here and you realise how everything operates, you can understand why everything's in a certain place, everything has to be in a certain place.
My name is Pete Dennis. I started here in May the 11th, 1992. I left my island and applied for the position of team member in the press shop. I got to come as a team leader when we first started in 1992. I can remember walking into the press shop, being in mind, the press that I worked on probably maximum up to 50 ton. We walked into there and 3,000 ton presses and there was about 3 ton all the flats. So that was a little bit daunting for me. The Toyota production system is the foundation of what Toyota do. Every single member here has the right to stop the line. If he sees something that's not quite right, we have what we call the animal system. It's not stop that line. Everybody's involved in it. It's not just top down. We encourage it, as we call it, bottom up. So if a team member comes to me and says, I have an idea for this, you don't ignore it. Because nobody has a better idea than that member. The biggest asset we've got is these guys working. It's not because you put them out in the last secret and look for the answers. That's not it. It's just the amount of faith and pride that people got. And they will do what they can to help this company because they will tell them that at the end of the day.
Okay. All right, so before you all run off to apply for jobs at Toyota, what's really nice about that video is there's a couple of things that are shown in there. One is who's heard of the and-on system before? out of interest. So if you saw in the film, the guy was lifting up and pulling a yellow cord. So that's how he stops the line. I just thought that was quite nice because I hadn't actually seen the physical and-on cable before. The other thing there, and there's a few things that the manager says that's quite interesting to me, is this phrase, you know, if a worker or a member comes to me with an idea, they're the experts. They're the ones that know how to improve the system. They're the ones that know what they're doing. And we'll come back to some of the ways that they improve that in a moment. So let's look at this. So we've got these two pillars. Oh, I've gone too far ahead. There we go. These two pillars, continuous improvement and respect for people. Now, interestingly, this first pillar, well, that's kind of the same as Taylor. That's what Taylor was doing. That's what he advocated for, is measuring, continuous improvement, and experimentation. I don't think he had much of this. I don't think he had much of respect for people. So we'll look at just a few of the other elements that make up the Toyota Way. So the first one is what they call becoming a learning organization, with a thing they refer to as Hansai, or reflection, and Kaizen. Now, I imagine most people have probably heard the phrase Kaizen. It gets around a lot in the favorite collection of Japanese words that Agilists have in their back pocket. This is an interesting one for me, Hansai, because in the Agile space, we do a reflection exercise. Anyone know what we do for reflection? Retrospectives, yeah. See that they got there first. So what they talk about here, becoming a learning organization. One of the things to becoming a learning organization is that you literally have to criticize every aspect of what your organization does. Nothing is sacred in the organization. Now that includes the product and the stuff that you're working on, but also the processes, the hierarchies, the systems. And it's really important to be in a place where everything can be questioned and everything can be pointed out. Have everyone in the company say, hang on, wait a sec, that process that we do is just kind of useless. In fact, I think, Selena, you were talking to me just the other day about a time tracking process in an organization where it was taking up so much time that they actually started to time how much time they were taking on time tracking. Which, yeah, needless to say, not the most valuable of processes, I imagine. And it's important for people to be able to kind of just, you know, point out when these crazy things are happening. Because everyone knows these things are crazy, and I'm sure we've all worked in organizations where there are processes like that everyone is saying, this is just crazy. And we are, but it's just the way it is. It's just the way it goes here. It's just how it works here. So they also have a well-known suggestion system. So who's heard of Toyota's suggestion box system? Anyone? Okay, interesting. So just to give you an example, I'm sure we know what a suggestion box is in an organization. Toyota have around 300,000 staff at the moment, okay? How many suggestions do you think they get on average each year? Any ideas? Go ahead. So you did? You had heard of it. You didn't put your hand up. God, you got to watch this guy. Yeah, stealth knowledge. So, yeah, that's right. Amazingly, they get 1 million on average every year. Now, they've been running this for decades. Another question, and you can be quiet, you. How many of those do you think they implement on an annual basis? Any ideas? Hands by percentage? 10%? Did someone say 10%? Okay, so it's actually over 90% on average each year. The interesting thing about this is that when they talk about when a member has an idea for something, they're regarded as the expert. Not only are they regarded as the expert, but they don't have a system where people have to ask for permission to make improvements. And some of those improvements are small. In fact, the question they ask employees is, what is the smallest thing you could do today to improve or make your job more effective or your teams more effective? They ask that to everyone. So some of those ideas are small, and that's great. It could just be a particular worker is at their station and they realize that they are having to stretch up a little too high each time to reach a tool that they have. So they are completely okay to stop the line, stop the whole line, okay? If you were working in Ford at the time, that's like shooting a capital offense. And adjust the tool, get it to a point where it's comfortable so you can work more effectively and start the line again. At some point when you stop the line, and we'll see this in a second, sure, you know what, a manager might wander over and say, hey, what's up? Is there a problem that I can help with? And you'll go, no, I'm fine, I'm just about to start it again, I just needed to adjust the tool because this is going to make me more effective. Oh, great, that's fine, fantastic. I wonder if we've experienced that in our organizations before. So another area, a thing called nemawashi, or building consensus. So when they discover problems or when they identify potential places for improvement, the aim is that you go straight to the source of the problem. So let's say we saw the and-on chord, so someone's noticed a quality problem. So you're stood at your station, a car is coming past and you notice a chip or a problem or something, some quality problem with the car. So you stop the line. Then you're going to look at it and wonder, okay, what's going on? And pretty quickly, someone's going to wander over. Probably a manager's going to wander up and say, is there a problem? Is something up? Because in the and-on system, if you notice, when they pulled the line, there was also a signboard with like flashing lights on it. So that shows whenever the line stopped, it flashes to show everyone where the problem is, where the line stopped occurred. And what's going to happen is they're going to then say, okay, well, I've noticed this issue, or I think I can improve the system, or I'm just adjusting my station. And what they might do is, because the line is stopped, everyone is free. Okay, everyone has their hands free. Everyone can stop and think about how to solve this problem. No one's running around screaming, In fact, they said that in the, I thought it was quite a nice thing. When we went down the Sterkfontein caves yesterday, the chap said, you know what, there are lights in the cave, okay, but we occasionally have power cuts. Just kind of happens sometimes. And just want to tell you that when we're down in the cave, if all the lights go out, you can scream if you want to. It might be a bit scary. Just don't run around, okay? Just don't run around madly. Because you're going to get hurt. No one's doing that in Toyota. No one's running around saying, the line stopped, we're losing billions of dollars a minute. So they then build consensus. So what that means is they'll have a conversation about the problem or the idea or whatever is the potential change. And they build consensus. That does not mean everyone is in complete agreement. Okay? Consensus does not mean they take a vote and take a majority vote on the thing. They just get to a point where they can agree that this is the best possible direction given what they know. And once they come up and there's this idea that they take a lot of time to discuss those ideas. They take time to go through and to make sure they've got all of those options, all of the ideas from the different diverse members of the team available. And then they implement a solution as quickly as possible. And when I say solution, potential solution. And in fact, what's interesting is they don't call it a solution, they call it an experiment. And what they actually then have a really important discussion about is this. It's, okay, so we think this is a potential direction we can go in. Next thing we all need to agree on is how will we know and be able to verify that we've had the outcome that we want. That's a really, really important question. So once they have consensus, they've had an experiment. It could be, in some cases, this could be as simple as machine is broken. This station is completely bust. We think we could try this thing, and obviously the outcome, how do we know it's working? Well, machine is working again. It's pretty easy. Or it could be vaguer than that. But once they've built that consensus and they've validated it, they've started the line again, they've made the changes, they've tested it, they then build and they record their consensus and their new understanding into a thing they call standardized work. So standardized work is kind of interesting. So standardized work are tasks that are clearly defined and all workers follow this process. That's kind of like what Taylor wanted to do. That is exactly what Taylor wanted to do. Except their definition of standardized tasks is this. Standardized tasks and processes are the foundation for continuous improvement and employee empowerment. Well, that's interesting. Why would it be anything to do with employee empowerment? Well, it's because standardized work in Toyota is a record of how they are working, not a diktat declaring how they should be working or how it should be done. And by how they are working, that means how they have decided they are working, how they have decided on consensus what the best way for them to be working is. And that's not with some sign-off from a leader or a manager. That's them deciding, based on them being the experts, that this is the best way for them to solve that particular problem or to deal with that particular thing. The employees are treated as experts. And they're encouraged actively to present their ideas for improvement. So, there we go. Let's have a look at this. So this is a demonstration of awesome keynote animation skills. So here's a line. And, oh, there's a problem. Because there's some quality issue he's noticed. Okay, so he stopped the line. I couldn't quite get him to reach his arm up, but imagine, he stopped the line. In this factory, they've upgraded. They've got psychic andon cords. And then his manager glides in. I don't know if you have wheelies in the UK, but in my factory, they all wear wheelies, these shoes you can like. So they then have a chat. He comes over and he says, okay, what's going on? What's happening? What's happening here? Is it okay? And he says, no, look, there's this weird chip in my box. I don't know why I'm getting these chips in my box. And he says, okay, well, is it an issue with your machine? He says, well, I don't think so. I mean, it seems to be coming in from further up. I don't think so. Okay, so what problem do you think it could be? Well, could it be the machining station? I don't know. They're a bit shitty these days. Well, I don't know. I've been to the machining station just now, actually, and I didn't see any issues with it. So what else do you think it could be? So he says, well, actually, I don't know. Jenny over here, she looks a bit dodgy. Maybe she's, I don't know, kicking the boxes as they go past. Who knows? Maybe. So they then put their wheelies on and glide over to see Jenny, and they have a shared conversation. What could be causing this quality problem? And at this point, and I couldn't fit them on the slide, imagine others gliding in from either side as people wonder what this problem could be. They then have a conversation where they discuss what's going on, what's happening, what ideas do we have to try and fix this problem. And then they say, well, what could we do about this? Okay, we've identified it is a problem with the station that Jenny's working at here. Okay, so what could we do? Well, we could try this thing, we could try that thing. All of these ideas will come up. And then, importantly, they decide on how they are going to validate whatever solution they have. Now, in this case, it's kind of obvious, you know. Ideally, once they've fixed it, this won't be here. This weird chip in the box will be gone. So I find this process really interesting. And in fact, sometimes people say, God, but the management conversation, that kind of, are you sure it's this? Are you really sure? Is that really what the problem might be? People say, that doesn't seem very respectful to me. That seems a little patronizing. You know, wouldn't it be really annoying if the managers were like that in my organization? And that's kind of interesting. Now, I think that this is partly unique to Toyota. Partly. But one of the things in Toyota is that almost everyone in their senior management positions have actually been promoted up from the floor. So they have some experience. They do actually know quite a bit about the stations there. But that's not completely abnormal. That's just very, it's uncommon for it to make up such a majority in many organizations. So there's this guy. So there's this guy called James Womack. He's a founder of a thing called the Lean Enterprise Institute in the US, and he's known for popularizing ideas around lean thinking. He says that over time, I've come to realize that this problem-solving process, and specifically the interaction between manager, leader, and the team, is the highest form of respect. So how does he describe that? The manager says, I respect your close-up knowledge and dedication to solve the problem. And the team members say, I respect your big picture perspective that allows you to ask the tough questions that guide me towards better solutions. So what's this about? It's about solving our problems together and not creating interesting divisions like the business versus the delivery team, for example. So I asked you right at the beginning, or I kind of left you hanging on the superpower, the Agile Superpower that we often forget. Does anyone have an idea what it is? Possibly the easiest question of this entire session. Might possibly be in the title. Any ideas? Collaboration, yes. Okay, fantastic. So it's not a big surprise, but it is something that, interestingly, I would say that a lack of collaboration, a lack of connection, a lack of people actually working together, probably the most common thing I see in organizations. So how do we get collaboration into product ownership? It's a one-person show, isn't it? I guess. So let's tie this back. So we can start as product owners by bringing hypotheses to our teams, not solutions to implement an idea. I think that if we did this thing, then we might get this outcome with the product. Then it's the team's job to go and find the simplest, quickest, cheapest experiment to invalidate, or to try and invalidate, this idea that I have. Why invalidate it as opposed to validate it? It's because if you try to validate your own hypotheses, you're way, way more likely to validate it than not, regardless of whether it's true or otherwise. There's a bias called the confirmation bias, which I'm sure we are aware of, but it's actually why in science, when people are disproving and planning their experiments, an experiment next to a hypothesis is always trying to disprove the hypotheses. So that experiment provides learning. And what's important here is that that learning it could well be, yay, validated hypotheses, we failed to invalidate the hypotheses. Great, awesome, we can progress forwards. But it could just as well be, nah, our idea sucked, didn't work how we wanted it to, or it didn't work in the way we expected it to. But that doesn't matter, because it's still learning. If you are trying to make progress, there are many, many times, if you are walking down a path and you have many, many, many options, many crossroads to go down, it's just as valuable to be stood still, closing off the paths that aren't going to lead to value, that aren't going to deliver value, as it is to be walking down the one that actually does. It's especially bad to make significant progress down a particular route to then discover that you've got to backtrack and come back again. So small, quick, cheap experiments. And interestingly, those small, quick, cheap experiments actually make up the bulk of the work that your teams are doing. They're not implementing stuff because we don't know what to implement yet. They're working it out. They're problem solving, because that's what they do. So, like someone throwing plates. It's quite fun. I know it's all right. I'm just worried if a plate comes through the curtain. You know, yeah. So is that like a juggling act later or something? So that learning leads into further hypotheses. And those hypotheses, as we learn more as a team and we understand the product collectively, because everyone is involved in this process, we end up with consensus. In science, someone produces a theory or a paper or a hypothesis or an idea, and that's peer-reviewed. And that begins to increase as those peer reviews, kind of generally agree with that thought. That increases some certainty and some understanding around that topic, okay? It doesn't prove anything, though. It just means that something that's peer-reviewed probably slightly more likely to be right than something that isn't. But over time, those scientists, other scientists, are going to try and disprove those theories. They're going to run experiments to try and build up the evidence. And what's interesting there is that we gradually form consensus as the evidence comes in to demonstrate that. But interestingly, nothing's ever sacred and nothing's ever described as certain. It is only ever described as most probable. The thing based on the evidence most likely at the moment, based on our current knowledge, based on our current understanding, just as easily disproved at any moment. So, the 5 pillars of collaborative product ownership. Let's tie this back together. So number 1, respect people. Don't bring your team solutions to implement. Show the team you respect their ability to solve the problems that they're there for. You know, they're paid quite a lot of money. It's kind of good to actually let them do their job. Embrace uncertainty. Nothing is more damaging to our organizations than fake certainty. We hear a lot about fake news. I think fake certainty does more damage, personally. We need to just accept that there is uncertainty in the work that we do. There's a phrase that I like. On day 1 of a project, you're as dumb as you will ever be about that project. On the last day of that project, you're as smart as you will ever be. That means that when, on day 1 of a project, you genuinely don't know what you're doing. And that's totally okay. That's fine. That's not a mark of incompetence. That's just a statement of reality. You don't know what you're doing because on day 1, you don't really know what the scope is yet. You don't fully understand the details of how you're going to build your eventual solution. And all that happens when you start a project with, 9,000 items in your backlog, God forbid, I've seen similar problems to that, is that gives the impression that there's greater certainty than there really is. It's like pretending that we understand the direction we're going to go in, when actually everyone knows that we're not going to build that exact thing. How many times, who's worked on a project where they started with a really detailed specification or 9 million items in the backlog or whatever else, and actually built exactly what they ended up with? And if they did they actually satisfy the customer at the end of it? I doubt it. Small experiments. When we're faced with uncertainty, what do we do? Oh my God, we don't know what we're doing. How do we deal with this problem? When you're stuck in the fog, the only thing you can do is step forwards and start to look around. Collaborate with the team on small experiments that gradually build a shared understanding of the product and the problem that you're trying to solve. And then you end up with a situation where everyone actually becomes a little bit product owner. Everyone understands that because everyone on the team is helping to build those experiments. Everyone becomes quite intimately knowledgeable of the goals that they're trying to achieve. What is this product needing to do? What do our customers really want? How do we know this product is actually doing the thing it should be doing? And that's not just stuck in one person's head. Not just stuck in the product owner's head. The product owner is there as a really valuable subject matter expert on the team, a really valuable facilitator to help get questions answered, to help bring in answers from the customer, but they are definitely not the only person on the team that can do those roles. Just as a software engineer or a tester are definitely not, these days, the only people on the team that can do those functions. Build continuous learning. With all of these experiments, we have learning. Importantly, it should, and you really need to be worried if it doesn't, quite regularly invalidate your theories, the theories and hypotheses that you come up with. Learning is always moving you towards your goal, even when it seems you haven't moved anywhere. If you've learned something, if you've managed to discount one of the 10,000 designs for a light bulb that Thomas Edison came up with before he eventually came up with the light bulb. Well, not quite that one. But and then finally, no complacency. Allow consensus to build naturally across the team. but ensure that it's safe to question everything, even the things that seem certain, especially the things that seem certain. Don't get complacent. Don't assume that the things that you have learned along the way will always be so, because stuff changes all the time. Markets change, customers change, people change, teams change. Things won't always be the same, especially in tech. So, let's pull this together. Product owners can respect the people on their team by collaborating with them on solving the problems and embracing the uncertainty of reality. Teams can overcome this uncertainty by using small experiments to test their hypotheses, which leads to continuous learning. Pardon me. And it builds consensus on the validity or invalidity of the hypotheses and the ideas, and gradually builds up an understanding of the current state of knowledge across the team. But it's genuine team intelligence, it's shared understanding. But no team should ever be complacent with the present state of understanding. No complacency. And it should always be safe to question anything, how certain it may seem. So, one of these side effects of implementing and working in this way, could the product owners stand up again? I'll be nicer to you this time. Could you all stand up? I promise. It'll be nice. So, one of the side effects of collaborating in this way and ending up with a team where there is genuine shared product knowledge, where there isn't it's not all of the accountability is not all on one person's head, is, well, could you take your stickers off, please? Welcome to the team. Thank you very much. There we go. Thank you.